Welcome back, friends. As you can see, I am recording in a new location. But I have changed houses over 30 times in my life, so you can hardly expect me to stay in the same room. Today, as promised, we are beginning with the self-editing course that I've been talking about for a while now. So, to get us started, a question. What is editing? Following the tried and true method, let's just mosey on over and take a gander at the Wikipedia definition. Editing is the process of selecting and preparing written material used by a person or an entity. It takes a special kind of person to find this interesting. I should know. I'm a professional editor. And just to give you an idea, when I was a boy, I used to spend literally hours of my time picking garnets out of sand with a pair of tweezers that I would then collect into a miniature Tabasco bottle. Love to my fellow editors out there, but we really are a peculiar kind of animal. Now, some writers have the dubious fortune of actually enjoying this kind of thing, and more power to them. For the rest of us, however, I come bearing good news. Just as you don't have to be a first-rate writer to be a first-rate editor, so you don't have to love, and you don't even necessarily have to know, the arts of editing in order to be an excellent reviser of your own work. Now, even as I speak these words, I can sense a degree of skepticism emanating from some of you.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
What's this, John? How can I revise my work if I don't even know how to edit?
Now, the problem here is that we are accustomed to considering a writer's revising and an editor's editing as being one and the same thing, when in truth they are in a certain sense even diametrically opposed to one another. So I want to start by considering editing. An editor's job, broadly understood, is to take a piece of writing written by another person and to correct, clarify, and improve it. He comes at a piece of writing from the perspective of a reader, external, naive, and impartial. External, because he has not been privy to the writer's creative process. Naive, because prior to coming to this work and actually reading it, he has little to no idea about how it's actually going to unfold. And impartial, because he has absolutely no vested interest in affirming the inherent worth of this writer's piece of writing. We writers enjoy none of these advantages. We are internal with respect to our work, completely immersed in the creative process. We are fully knowledgeable about every aspect of our book's plot and presentation, and we are, sometimes despite ourselves, deeply invested in the outcome and the reception of our work. Writers generally do not make good self-editors for much the same reason that a person accused of a crime is not expected to defend himself in a court of law. If we don't ask defendants to be their own attorneys, then why do we ask writers to be their own editors? I would submit that it is because we are laboring under the sad misconception that there is no viable alternative. We're obediently following the process that's been taught to us since our grade school days. First draft, second draft, third draft, final draft, rereading our work from start to finish at every phase, proofreading, etc., etc., etc. And there's nothing inherently wrong with any of this. It can be quite useful when used at the right moment and in the right context. But by itself, it can only carry us so far. Every writer who's been reduced to an exhausted, spineless, dispirited blob after the 20th go through his entire manuscript knows precisely what I'm talking about. It's an unhappily common experience. You bite the bullet and get ready to edit. You make yourself a big cup of coffee and sit down ready to read your draft with a few vague notions rolling through your head about what you're going to be working with. Character development, plot arcs, voice, pacing, etc. You might even have a checklist. You start reading through, trying your best to spot the problems in these altogether abstract and intangible issues, but you find you can't take 5 steps without stumbling over a glaring typo or a misplaced comma. So you lumber through the whole manuscript, mainly fixing these ugly little errors, naggingly aware that you've addressed actually none of the overarching issues that you originally set out to look at. Ah well, second time around, cleaner draft, this will all surely be easier to work, won't it? So you make yourself another coffee, and you sit down again and get a start, only to find yourself stumbling every 10 steps over spelling errors and other wandering punctuation. After the third or fourth read-through and the 1000th run-on sentence, you start to fall into a kind of writerly snow blindness. You can't even see your own work any longer for having stared at it for too long. By the 5th and the 6th read-through and the 20th cup of joe, you start wondering why you even wrote the thing to begin with, or who in heaven's name will ever want to read it. But who was the idiot that convinced you that self-editing would be a good idea? And the sad thing is, most writers think that this is just part of the process. Alright, so let's sum up your entire problem with a single self-evident proposition. You cannot edit your own work as if you had not written it. That kind of third-person, objective perspective is not your forte as a writer. But why play to your weakness? Your strength as a writer lies elsewhere. You have something that no reader, not even the most dedicated, and no editor, not even the most talented, can ever possess. You have the burning creative vision which gave birth to this work in the first place. What you need is not another mechanical process of outside-in editing, but rather the art of vitally reassessing your work from the inside out. And that is an art that can be learned, practiced, and perfected. So let's ditch editing. Editing, whether it be developmental or line or copy, does not concern us. Editing is the business of that strange race of editors, and God bless them. What we have to do is to learn how to more fully capture and embody our original vision of our work. We have to learn not editing and not even revising, but a new art, the art of revisioning, seeing again. So let's briefly consider how this approach differs from that of editing. Editing begins necessarily from the surface of the work, the writing, and it lets this surface indicate the contours of plot, the characters, the pacing, the structure. It then critiques and modifies these interior elements by working at them from the outside in. Revisioning begins from the innermost essence of a piece of writing and uses this standard to refine and clarify and invigorate the inner unfolding of plot and character and world. It works from the inside out. Editing is impersonal. It takes the writing of any given writer and it applies universal standards and rules to that writing. Revisioning is profoundly personal. It takes your writing, your individual artistic fingerprint, and carries your unique vision nearer to its ideal realization. Editing is the critical process of rectifying a manuscript in order to make it align more perfectly with the needs and the tastes of the reader and the market. Revisioning is the creative process of bringing a piece of writing to accord ever more perfectly with a writer's sovereign vision. In short, editing is the art of putting writing to trial by fire. But revisioning is the continuation of the living artistic flame itself. So the first bit of revisioning that we have to do is of our editing process itself. We have to learn to see it in a new light and to approach it in a new spirit. Not the hesitant, resigned attitude of a man who's trudging through an inevitable and infernal swamp, but the enthusiastic, joyful attitude of an artist at his work. That sounds better, doesn't it? Now, somebody out there is probably saying to himself,
All right, this does sound pretty good, John. But how do we actually go about doing this? How can we actually transform editing into this so-called revisioning process? Is such a thing even possible?
friends, it most certainly is. In the following videos, I'm going to be laying out a full, logically progressive process that I've developed after years of being a writer and an editor that you can use to get there. But I'm going to give you, right from the start, the most important secret of success. It is disarmingly simple, but if you can get this right, then everything else is going to fall into place. To revision your work effectively and powerfully, you need to have, above all, one single thing: a clear, distinct, and active sense of the spirit, the essence, the vital core of your writing. Rather than treating your writing as a thing, a book or a manuscript or an object to be handled, we have to rather start elevating our work to its proper dignity, a living piece of art that one day will have a life of its own in the world. So we must try before anything else to gain a sense of in what that life actually consists. So for the purposes of this first video, I want you to perform a very simple exercise. Call your book or your story or your piece of writing into mind. Bring it into your field of consciousness, not as an object, but as an animate being, a living presence, almost a personality. Don't worry too much about articulating or describing this presence. That's not what's important. It's actually best not to cover it up in too many words or concepts. What we're dealing with here is something elusive, something that transcends our language because it stands behind our language and actuates our language. But at the same time, don't deny any associations that might come to you connected with this idea of the core of your work. These might be emotions or colors or gestures or traits or objects. The more clearly that you can represent this inner life of your writing to yourself, the more you can use it in the process of revisioning your work. The goal is to be able to access it lucidly and immediately, almost on demand. If you can do this, then you can bring it to bear constantly on all of the actual problems of your writing. Let's say there's a section of your writing that you've been debating cutting altogether, but you continue clinging to it, and you're trying to figure out, should I get rid of this or should I keep it? Does it form an integral part of my work, or is it just something superfluous that I happen to be affectionate towards? How can you decide? Following the technique that I'm proposing, you can actually put it side by side with the spirit of your work to see if it actually supports or plays off the inner life of that writing, if it is in harmony or fruitful tension with that life, or if it is, on the other hand, just a contradictory or redundant appendix to that life. Or again, say that you're wondering whether a given character has been given too much attention or whether a given character should be in your book at all. Set him against the light and the backdrop of your book's inner spirit. How does he feel? How does he stand out against that illumination? What if you're struggling with tone or word choice or voice? All of this too can be measured against the internal spirit of your writing. With this idea of the spirit of your writing, you are establishing an internal standard beyond your mere preferences or sympathies, an internal objective arbiter who can guide you as a writer and the choices that you will have to make. So all of this might sound at present a bit abstract and hazy, maybe even a bit woo-woo, But in future videos, we're going to be sitting down and looking very practically and directly at how to get a sense of this spirit, how to begin to develop it as a tool that can be used in every single phase of your self-revisioning, in every part and problem of your book. We'll consider at greater length how to envision the spirit and how to consider it in its intersection with what I call the fundamentals of your book, which is to say, world, character, and plot. But in the meantime, I'd urge you to just play around with this a little. Try it out. Sit down for a while, focus on this, meditate on it, try to understand in a very intimate and deep way what this spirit of your work actually is, and how it might be of use to you and some of the difficulties that you particularly are facing in the editing of your work. Go back to some problem spot in your manuscript. Perhaps begin with a smaller one, but you can tackle a big one if you'd like as well. And try to feel your way through it, using this idea of the core of your work as a guide. All right, so here we briefly discuss what we might call the internal arbiter of your writing. In the next video, we're going to continue this discussion, and we're also going to introduce what we might call the external arbiter. That's right, we're going to be discussing that dreadful being who haunts the reader's very dreams, terrorizing us in the dark hours of the night, and casting our lives into bottomless pits of existential despair.
The reader.
I'll leave you with a simple question to ponder in the meantime. Just who is this reader? Stay tuned for an answer that might well surprise you, but I'll give you a hint. If you're considering your reader as a real person out there somewhere in the world, you might be on the wrong track. All right, so I hope that all of this has been useful or at least a little tantalizing. As we progress, all of this will become clearer. I almost guarantee it. But I wanted in this first video to lay some groundwork and a bit of an understanding of why I think some of the traditional approaches to self-editing are not doing us many favors. But please do leave me some comments down below to tell me what you think of this new approach to self-editing and what your own experience with self-editing has been. If you find it to be a pleasant process and one that you like, or if you have difficulties with it, why? Tell me as well if this approach resonates in any way with you, if you think that I might be on the right track with it, or if you rather think that I should probably be punished for my hubris by locking me into a cage with 5 to 10 starving readers. All right, with that, thank you so much for coming with me to the end in this first video of new site self-editing, and I'll look forward to seeing you for the second video, which will be coming next Friday. A brief word about the new site self-editing course. This course will be offered for free on YouTube to anyone who wishes to go through it. If you would like some bonus material, which will help you to work through the various phases of this course, and will help you to apply all of its lessons in a much more immediate and hands-on fashion, you can sign up for this material below. This is also completely free. Thanks so much, and until next Friday, farewell.